Welcome. I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. Do you have a notepad and a pen handy? If not, pause the video right now so that you can grab that. I want you to take down some notes. I want you to jot down something, an action item that you will implement in your business today. It's all about implementation. The whole purpose of these discussions is for us to grow our business, drive your business forward, and you can't do that without implementing. Okay, so you've heard it said before that your people are the most valuable asset of your business. The most valuable resource is your people. And that is sort of cliche and it sounds a little trite, but in fact, it's true, right? People are the most important part of any business. So wouldn't it be nice if your people, if all your employees, your team members, if they did what was expected of them each and every time without fail? Now, we all know that that doesn't happen. In fact, in Management 101, step number 3 suggests and states that people will fail to do what's expected of them from time to time. And if you accept that, then today's topic should be of particular interest to you. Why is it? Why is it? I mean, it may be easy to just say, well, we're all human, we're imperfect. And of course, that's true. But why do people not do what's expected of them? I'm here to tell you that there's a finite number of reasons. You can categorize this very simply. And once you do so, once you've taken the time to explore the reasons why people fail to do what is expected of them, then you can mitigate against that. Then you can do something, you can implement something in your business to offset that tendency, and you can improve your business as a result. So I have itemized what I believe are all the reasons. Throughout my many years of management, everything comes down to just a handful of reasons. And I don't know why I can't give you a definitive number, a finite number. It depends on how, I guess I do know, it depends on how you categorize them. I think there's 3 main categories of reasons why people fail to do what's expected of them from time to time. And as you break those out into a little bit more granular, specific detail, you could say there's there's less than 10. Let's call it maximum 8 reasons why people don't do what is expected of them, why they fail to meet expectations from time to time. All right, so I'm curious, maybe you want to, for fun, pause the video now and you want to jot down what you think are those reasons and then compare them with what I share with you. Are there any reasons you come up with that I haven't or that I won't put in my list? And conversely, how many will I have come up with that you failed to consider? All right, here goes. The number 1 reason, and I'm not saying these when I itemize them, I put them in an order that makes sense to me, but this isn't based on frequency or any kind of weighting or anything like that. It's just how I've organized them. So for me, the first reason, not necessarily the number 1, the first reason people fail to do what's expected of them is that they're simply incapable of doing what's expected of them. And that comes down to your hiring decision and what people you have doing what, the role descriptions, what have you delegated to people. Sometimes people just cannot do what you want them to do or need them to do. So it would be ludicrous for you to continue giving somebody a task or an assignment or a role description or some kind of responsibility that they're incapable of accomplishing. And why are they incapable? Well, it may be that they're incapable because they lack the aptitude, and that's just a reality. Sometimes I'm not capable of doing everything anyone may want of me. I'm just not good at some things. Some things you could argue are impossible for some people to do. And so we lack the aptitude, let's call it the raw materials. If you've hired somebody or you've assigned a responsibility to somebody that they don't have the right makeup, whether it's genetic or whatever kind of aptitude, maybe they don't have the intellect to carry it out or something like that, then, they're not going to do it. Maybe under the same heading, the same category of they are incapable, they lack sufficient resources to be able to do it. Maybe there are, like, let's just use a simple example. If you required somebody to obtain an item as part of a process from the top shelf, but you didn't give them a tool like a ladder to do so, they may be incapable. They're jumping, they're trying to climb up there, and they may be incapable. So the resources or the tools, I suppose those are different. Maybe you expect somebody to be able to do some marketing for you and generate extra leads, but you fail to give them the financial resources, which let's define that differently than a tool. So a tool and a resource for the purposes of this conversation and this discussion can be thought of as different. So we talked about that they may be incapable due to aptitude. They may be incapable due to having the wrong tools or insufficient tools. They may be incapable of doing something due to having insufficient resources, such as financial resources. And it may be that they're incapable due to a lack of training. And once they have the training, they are capable. Once they have the resources, once they're given the tools, they are capable. And you can see what you have here is really the onus really comes back to you. And if you haven't taken a visit to my 4 obligations of management video, you should really do this, because this is the other side of that coin. When it's about you, really all of these things, your people's success comes down to you. So if you hired somebody who is incapable due to having, a lack of aptitude, and you really hired that person, and this is what you need them to do, you've made a mistake in your hiring, and you need to revisit that. Now, hopefully you have some, because you've invested all this time in this person and in the recruitment process, hopefully you have another way that you may be able to redirect their efforts and maybe give them a different role description, a different job. But if not, then you have to, admit defeat, so to speak. You have to admit your mistake and help that person land on their feet and go and replace them. You cannot give somebody a raw material that they're missing. And if a particular task, a particular responsibility requires an aptitude, you need to be hiring for that and making sure that's your first obligation. And there's just no way around it. You're just going to be continually disappointed. On the other things, though, we talked about resources, tools, and training. Those are things that are incumbent upon you to provide to the person. And you can put the onus back on them. Perhaps you don't have the time to train. So maybe when you were recruiting and throughout the screening process, and maybe even in your advertisement, you were seeking a person with a particular set of skills and experience that you should have had them substantiate throughout the hiring process, so that you don't find out later that they're incapable due to a lack of experience, due to a lack of training. If you know that you do not have the time and you personally don't have the resources to be able to provide that training. So these are things to consider, and you can put the onus, as I say, back on them by making sure and explaining that in the hiring process. It's like, we don't have time to train on this particular skill, so we're looking for someone that has sufficient experience and understands this, because it's going to be, you're going to hit the job, baptism of fire. You're going to hit the ground running, is the metaphor I was looking for there. It may be that you've identified a part of your business that requires a new skill set, something that you don't have any experience with, and you're hiring somebody to, fill that need within your business, and you don't have a particular experience or aptitude yourself to be able to do that. You need to explain that during the hiring process, and ask a person, if you do lack this experience, ask a person, okay, what sort of resources, what sort of tools would we need to have in place for you to be able to meet my expectations? And that's a discussion that is perfectly okay for you to have. More than okay, it's incumbent upon you to have it. You are obligated to have this conversation so that you can make sure that person is successful. So the first category there is a person doesn't do what is expected of them because they are incapable. Let's review again. Is it their aptitude? They're incapable because they don't have the aptitude to be able to do it. I have no equestrian skills. If you hired me to be able to do something with horses, I'm allergic to horses, and I didn't understand it, I just wouldn't have the aptitude to do it, and I wouldn't be able to perform it. If you hired me to navigate a rocket to the moon or maybe beyond, I just don't have the aptitude to be able to do that. And so you would be making a mistake to hire me now. As a caveat there, I imagine that the rockets now are mostly self-guiding, but still I don't have the aptitude if anything went wrong. So you get the idea. Aptitude, you've got to hire to make sure you have the right aptitude. And when you're evaluating your team, do they have the aptitude? Do they have the raw materials to be able to do what's expected of them? And the other thing was resources, tools, and training. You've got to make sure that you put those things in place. The onus is back on you. Make sure you share that onus at minimum with your people by asking them to clarify for you what they will need in order to meet expectations, and then have that discussion. The next reason people fail to do what is expected of them is a lack of clarification. Perhaps they didn't know it was expected of them. And once they know it's expected of them, they may do it, and do it very well, and do it religiously, so to speak, very consistently, and not let you down. So again, if you're experiencing with your people, with your team, that they are failing to do what's expected, or an individual is failing to do what's expected of him, ask yourself, does he understand? And of course, when you meet with people and you have these discussions, be fair with them, give them an opportunity to explain. And it may be that somebody talks to you and says, you know what, I really didn't know that you wanted me to do that. So you have to have good documented role descriptions, and you need to have good communication, a culture of communication, and set periodic times where you'll get to, do performance reviews. You get to discuss with people, and don't be afraid of those things. You need to have this. This is, even though it takes up time, it's going to save you time in the long run, because you're going to have this really good communication culture, and you're going to have these discussions, and it's going to innovate and improve your business in ways that you haven't imagined by investing the time in that communication. But you have to ask your team, do you understand what I expect of you? Okay, is there any way that, there is a lack of clarity? Because, ask me by all means, and make sure that you have mechanisms and opportunities for your team to ask you when they do need clarification. Okay, so that's the second main category of why people fail to do what's expected of them, is that they didn't know. There's a lack of clarity of what's expected. And then the third one and the final category, and we could break this out a little bit, is that there is a lack of accountability. And if you're picking up on a theme here, it comes back to you. Now, you would love to have team members that will just do what's expected of them without you holding them accountable, but that's not reality. That's not the world we live in. Everyone, including yourself, including me, does better when we're held accountable in some way. Like, imagine you've set a goal for yourself, something that's a little bit elusive. It might have to do with your health or a relationship or something like that. By including someone else in, like, letting somebody else know what you're trying to accomplish, you have more accountability. The more accountability you have, the more likely you are to exceed. And it's the same with your people. You have to set up accountability. I've covered in a separate video a whole thing on how you can build a culture of accountability, and what the actual things that you need to do, the details you need to carry out to have accountability. Under this heading of lack of accountability, we can break that down a little bit into, sort of sub reasons why people don't do what's expected of them. And it may be that they forgot, right? And that's not such a bad thing. That's something that should be fairly easy to correct. We can use, tools and technology. So people are negligent, they forget. And I'm going to say those are the same thing. Forgetting and being negligent to do something that they know is expected of them, that they are capable of doing, and they didn't do. It's like, oops, it slipped through the cracks. I forgot. I was negligent. And, the same thing is if somebody's disorganized and they weren't able to squeeze it into their day or whatever, that's still I'm going to put under the heading, you might want to break this out into a separate reason, but I'd put that under the heading of negligent, because they'd be negligent in not prioritizing the skills or not seeking clarification from you of what they need to do when they have competing interests. Which of these things should I allow to not accomplish? But you can allow for that. People will forget, people will be negligent, sometimes people will be a little bit disorganized, and that's all about accountability. The next one is they may be obstinate. They may be, due to a lack of buy-in, they just aren't going to do it. It's like a refusal to do it. And maybe they're hoping that flies under the radar. But if you have a good accountability culture in your organization, that won't fly. I mean, if you've made the determination as a reasonable manager, as a reasonable entrepreneur and business owner, that this is something someone needs to do, and you've communicated that clearly with them, and they are capable and they have the right resources, training, tools, raw materials to do it, and you've clarified it, then you expect that it's done. Now, they have an opportunity to say to you at this point, maybe they have some sort of, I don't know, a religious or moral objective or objection to doing something, then that's probably a far out example, but I've seen this before in management. Then you can discuss that and you can say, okay, well, I guess that shouldn't be delegated to you. I'll need to have, you might want to reconsider that or what have you. But ordinarily, if you're running into this thing about obstinance, it's, one of these stalemate situations. It's like, well, I need this to be done. And unless it defaults back to one of the aforementioned examples, like, well, I'm just not capable, or I don't have enough training on that. If it's just obstinance, they don't believe in it. They think, I don't understand why that needs to be done. Then put the onus back on yourself in terms of, doing a little bit of a salesmanship and using your persuasion, your power of persuasion and influence, and talk to them about why this is important. But as the boss, you get to make the final decision. I would recommend that you take some time to get the buy-in, because people will do a much better job. You'll have much greater success if they believe in it. And they're like, oh, okay, I get it. Now I see, and I see what's in it for me. So this could be a situation where your incentives don't align, your objectives don't align, and you need to talk to the person. And they say, well, hey, I'm not doing it because I'm not paid for it. This is often symptomatic of a change in an organization. So you add to somebody's role description. You say, well, this is something that I need you to do. And they think to themselves, I'm not getting any more money for this or any more credit. What's in it for me? I've worked here all these years. I never had to do that before. Why is that my responsibility now? That comes back down to communication. But at the end of the day, if as the manager, you've made the determination, the person is capable, this is reasonable, and I've given them the training, the tools, the resources, and I've clarified for them, and you don't have a lot of other options, then you're just going to have to say, this is what you need to do. And in terms of obstinance, the way to deal with that, first, a proactive way to deal with it is to try to gain buy-in. But if you can't, then you either have to tell the person, I'm sorry, you like it or not, you have to do it. You don't necessarily like everything you have to do in your job. And if they still won't do it, of course, you may have to find someone else, or probably have to find someone else. And then the last reason is laziness. We all, and that sounds sort of condemning, and it sounds, like, oh, wow, you're calling the person lazy. No, not every person, is overall lazy. Most people aren't lazy in general just because laziness got the best of them. Sort of a lack of motivation, we'll call it, on a particular time. Remember, these aren't things that a person never does. It's that from time to time, they let you down and fail to meet your expectations and do what's expected of them. And so what I was trying to do is outline for you the reasons. When you ask, when you inquire, it'll come down to one of these things. Okay, let's go through those categories again. It's either they're incapable, they lack clarification, or there's a lack of accountability in your organization. They have a lack of accountability. And then when we said, if they're incapable, it could be their aptitude, it could be that they lack resources, training, or a specific tool they need. It might be a piece of software. And then in terms of clarification, that really comes down to, That's just one reason, and it comes down to documenting and formally explaining, having good communication. This all happens over time. It's okay for a person to lack a little bit of clarification, and then you went and you had a quick meeting, and they're like, oh, okay, I got it, boss, going forward, won't have a problem with that. And then that last one comes down to, accountability can be broken out into that they are negligent, they forgot, they lack organization. I'm calling that all the same thing. Let's call it negligence or disorganization, forgetting. It's all the same thing, bottom line. And there may be obstinance where they lack buy-in, or they may be lazy. All of these things can be remedied through what I mentioned earlier, which is a culture of communication and accountability. So you talk about this each and every time somebody fails you. Don't vent to your other stakeholders, don't gossip about it, and don't just, be frustrated, and certainly don't get angry at them. Sit them down, let them explain to you why. You will find it comes down to one of these categories. All of them you're able to fix quite easily, except for two, where the person is incapable due to aptitude, or they lack accountability and they're obstinate and they refuse, they dig their heels in. In those two cases, you've got to replace the person. Everything else that I mentioned, you can deal with through communication. And by doing this very consistently and exercising consequences, delivering consequences to a person, then you will be able to remedy this problem, and you won't have a culture where people consistently fail to do what's expected of them. You will be able to mitigate that. You'll be able to minimize that. You'll be able to bring the number of incidences where people fail to do what's expected of them to a minimum, and that's what it's all about. So if you agree that your people are your most important asset, your greatest resource in your business, then why wouldn't you invest the time? It's all about the time and investment through communication to create this culture. Talk to them, find out, be reasonable, and these problems will be a thing of the past. I think that's where we're going to leave it for today, and I hope you got something of this. Did I leave something out? Is there a reason that you've experienced that people don't do what's expected of them from time to time, and it should go on my list? If so, leave a comment so that we can all learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.